Dear Mom, I bet you are surprised to be getting this letter. It's been a long, long time. I've been thinking a lot about my life lately, Mom, and how I ended up where I ended up. And I thought I should write you. Not to explain or make excuses for the things I've done, but to share something with you. Something I think it's important you should know. You ever see a homeless guy walking along talking to himself? Think maybe he's crazy, right? Well, if you see me talking, it's not to myself. No, I'm talking to God. You can believe me and him got a lot to talk about. We got a real history. See, my father was a minister. He did everything he could for anyone he could. Didn't matter if you were rich or poor, or if you were in his flock or not. If you needed help, he was there. He was the greatest man I ever knew, and I was proud to be his son. Now me? When I was 9 years old, my class had a project. What do you want to be when you grow up? Some kids said fireman, some said policeman. The suck-ups said teacher. But me? I said professional thief, or hitman, and I meant it too. See, I knew I'd never be the man my father was. I'd never measure up. So I spent my life being so different that no one could ever compare me to him. And I accomplished what I set out to do that day. No, I wasn't a hitman. But I was a thief. How'd that go? Well, I ended up on the street getting loaded every chance I got, so not great. But eventually I got clean and I moved back home with my parents. I got married, had a son, was working as a contractor, things were good. And my parents even started to trust me again. Then, my dad had an accident. His legs got burnt up in an electric blanket that caught fire. We didn't even know how bad it was until later. Went into a coma and we had to... See, here was my father, this great man who devoted his life to the Lord and to others. Never spent one day thinking about himself, only others. And he died this horrible death, scared and in pain. And on that day we decided to turn off his machines. That day was the day I decided I didn't believe in God anymore. And I also fell off the wagon again, hard. Ended back on the streets for years. See, something about me, I walk. I love to walk all day, every day. Even when I'm loaded at my worst, I walk. I love the freedom. And sometimes, while I'm walking, I be talking to God, telling him I hated him, that he didn't deserve praise. I told him that there was no reason that a great man like my father would have to die in pain. If he couldn't spare him that kind of man, what good was he? But what I didn't know at the time was that something had happened. You know, something started that day that my father went into the hospital. See, the cops used to chase me all the time. You know, and I'd see them, I'd run. But during that time that my father was in the hospital, we got to know each other, me and the cops. And They realized I wasn't so bad. I was just a regular guy that made some mistakes, like everybody else. So when I got loaded and hit the streets again, instead of chasing me, they'd stop me and ask how I was. One day, they stopped me and they told me about this homeless man that had just gone into the hospital and that he was alone. And they asked me if I'd be willing to go and sit with him. So I did. And then they just kept asking me, you know, again and again, and I'd go and I'd just read to them or just sit with them. Just let them know that somebody cared. Everyone just wants to know that they aren't. Being on the streets can be lonely. Believe me, I know. Mom, I know you are disappointed in me, but I want to tell you that in the city of Norwalk, if a homeless person gets sick and the cops come out and look for me, not to arrest me, but to bring me there to sit with them. One night they told me about this lady who was dying. She was pretty old and it was just her time. They said that she had no family as far as they knew and asked if I would come and sit with her. So I went and held her hand while she was sleeping. She opened her eyes once and saw me. She closed her eyes and passed. Sitting there in that quiet room holding that lady's hand, I realized something. Dad's dying actually allowed me to find myself, to feel and find my calling. I know I'm not the man my dad was, not even close, but I am proud of who I am now, maybe for the first time in my life. I am sober now and have been for a while, and I'm not going back. This time I have a purpose, and I believe in God again. I know you spent a lot of years wondering what you did wrong, and the answer is nothing. I had a childhood as good as anybody's. You made sure we had food and clothing and love. You were a perfect mother. And I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry you ever had to think you weren't. I love you and I miss you. Love, Dusty.